Welcome to Dark Feed, where once you find the feed, it finds you. It starts like so many others, with a quiet road, a parked car, and a promise that no one keeps. Promise that this is a safe place, that the trees don't see, that if you're careful, if you're quick, nothing bad will happen. But promises like that only last until someone breaks them. And out here on Virginia's Colonial Parkway, someone broke everything. They called them the Lover's Lane murders. But that's too neat, too nostalgic, too soft. Because what happened between 1986 and 1989 wasn't about love. It was about control. It was about cruelty. It was about someone hunting young couples, then making them disappear. And no one knows why. It begins in October 1986. The air was cold, damp, the kind of fall that turns leaves to rust and fog to steel. Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were parked on the Colonial Parkway, a 23-mile stretch of road that winds between Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. A place soaked in American history, but now stained with something else. Kathy was 27, a former Navy officer, smart, strong. She'd just moved into a new apartment with her dog and her girlfriend, Rebecca. Rebecca was 21, a college student at William and Mary. They'd been dating a short while, but they were close. And that night, they drove out to the parkway. Maybe for some quiet, maybe just to talk, maybe something more. It doesn't matter now. What matters is this: they never came back. Their white Honda Civic was found the next day. It was parked just off the road, facing the York River. The windows were smashed, the glove box ripped open. The driver's door was cracked, like someone had tried to open it but gave up. The car was soaked in gasoline. Someone had tried to burn it, tried but failed. The fire didn't take, but the damage had already been done. Inside the trunk were Kathy and Rebecca. They'd been strangled, their throats slashed so violently it nearly decapitated one of them. Their bodies were stuffed into the hatchback like trash, and whoever did it had made sure there were no fingerprints, no usable DNA, no tire tracks, just a message. No one is safe out here. People said it was a hate crime, that someone found two women together and couldn't handle it. But there were problems with that theory. The way the car was staged, the use of gasoline, the gloves, the planning. This wasn't a rage killing. It was cold, thought out, efficient, almost surgical. And worse, it wouldn't be the last. A year later, in 1987, another couple vanished. David Knobling and Robin Edwards. David was 20, a hardworking guy from Hampton who loved cars and his little brother. Robin was 14, wild, rebellious, known for sneaking out. She was too young for him. Everyone said so, but they met up anyway. And one night in September, they drove out to a secluded spot near the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge, just off the James River. David's truck was found a day later, doors open, radio still on, windshield wipers frozen mid-swipe, like someone had stopped time.
No keys, no wallets.
No sign of David or Robin. At first, cops thought they ran away. But 3 days later, their bodies were found. On the beach, partially submerged, clothes in disarray. No clear cause of death. One of them had a gunshot wound. The other maybe drowned, or maybe not. The autopsies were inconclusive, but the pattern was forming. Young couple, remote location, vehicle left behind.
No robbery.
No sexual assault, just death and silence. In 1988, it happened again. This time, it was Cassandra Haley and Richard Call. She was 18. He was 20. First date, just a night out dancing. They left a party around 1:30 a.m. Never seen again. His red Toyota Celica was found near the York River, not far from where Kathy and Rebecca's car had been. Neatly parked, doors closed, nothing inside disturbed, no signs of struggle, no blood.
No bodies.
To this day, Cassandra and Richard have never been found. Not a tooth, not a bone, just gone. 3 couples, 3 years, 1 road. By now, the FBI was involved. The Virginia State Police, local departments, everyone was chasing shadows, trying to find connections, trying to pretend this was just a coincidence. But the coincidences kept piling up. In 1989, the killer came back. This time, it was Daniel Lauer and Anna Maria Phelps. He was 21. She was 18. Not exactly a couple. Anna Maria was dating Daniel's brother, but they were traveling together, moving to Virginia Beach. They never arrived. Their car was found at a rest stop off I-64, doors locked, keys on the seat, blankets folded in the back. No blood, no sign of struggle. A month later, their bodies were discovered in the woods nearby. They were covered with a blanket, partially buried under brush. Decomposition made the autopsy difficult, but it appeared they'd both been stabbed. For couples, for years, the FBI quietly began referring to them as the Colonial Parkway murders. But they never said serial killer, not officially, because saying that would mean admitting they were being hunted, that someone was using the woods and rivers and lonely roads of Virginia as their killing field. Each scene was different. Some victims were shot, some strangled, some stabbed, some weren't found at all. That gave investigators an out, a reason to say the cases weren't connected. But the families knew better. They saw the pattern, the couples, the locations, the care taken to stage each scene, the lack of motive, the lack of forensic evidence. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't chaotic. It was clean, efficient, invisible. And the scariest thing? The killer stopped, at least officially. After 1989, the murders on the Colonial Parkway ended. But maybe they just moved. Maybe the killer found a new road, a new place to hunt. Or maybe he was someone close, someone who aged out, got bored, got scared, or died. To this day, the FBI won't release most of the files. Key details are redacted, timelines altered, evidence missing. The families say they've been kept in the dark. And still, the questions remain. Why couples? Why the Parkway? Why were some bodies displayed while others were hidden? Why was gasoline used in one case but not the others? And why has no one, not one person, ever been arrested? They say history repeats itself. On the Colonial Parkway, it does something worse. It waits. In the silence between headlights, in the fog that creeps off the river, in the cold wind that whispers through the trees. Out there, someone is still waiting, and the road is always open. The problem with a ghost story is that it doesn't end when the lights come on. It lingers, hangs in the air like smoke, follows you home, makes you double-check the locks and peek out the blinds. And the Colonial Parkway murders, what happened between 1986 and 1989, was a ghost story dressed up as a crime scene. It looked like something solvable. But every time investigators tried to get close, it vanished. It didn't act like other serial killings. It didn't follow rules. It made its own. For couples, 8 people, all young, all vanishing along the roads and rivers of Virginia. And by 1990, all anyone had were theories. The official ones were weak. The unofficial ones were terrifying. Some thought it was a park ranger, someone with access to the secluded parts of the parkway, someone who could flash a badge, get close, disarm. Others thought it was military, ex-military, maybe someone trained to kill quickly, cleanly, and without remorse. The locations weren't random. Many were near naval bases, installations, secluded turnouts rarely traveled after dark. But those were just ideas, stories to make sense of a pattern with no face. The FBI had theories too. In 1996, they admitted they believed the killings were connected, that a single killer was responsible. But they didn't name a suspect, didn't issue a warrant. They just said they were looking into it, and then they stopped talking. That silence lasted for years. But the families, especially Kathy Thomas's sister, Becky, never stopped. They pushed, filed FOIA requests, held press conferences, fought for access to their loved ones' case files. And what they found wasn't pretty. There were reports that key evidence had been lost.
Audiotapes.
Physical files. Some autopsy photos were missing. DNA samples had degraded. And worst of all, each murder was investigated by a different local agency. Jurisdictional overlaps, competing egos, miscommunication, created gaps in the timeline, holes where evidence should have been. No one ever sat down and connected the cases properly. Not at the beginning, not when it mattered. And that gave the killer room to move. By the early 2000s, a man named Bill Thomas, Kathy's brother, joined the fight. With his help, the families of all 8 victims began organizing, coordinating, sharing files. They weren't waiting on the system anymore, and they started to notice something else. Other couples had gone missing in Virginia in the same years. Similar patterns, similar roads, cases dismissed as unrelated. Some didn't involve a car. Others were chalked up to runaways. But the more they looked, the more it felt like this wasn't 4 cases, it was more. They started calling it a series. Some reporters dubbed the killer the Parkway Predator. Others suggested it might have been more than one person, a group, pair. Killers who operated as a team, dividing up the roles, luring, controlling, disposing. It would explain the inconsistencies, the different weapons, the gaps in time. But that idea brought its own terror. Because if this was more than one person, how many are still out there? One theory points to a former cop, a name whispered but never printed. Someone who lived nearby, had a violent history, and access to patrol lights. Rumors swirled, but there was no proof. Just fragments, just shadows. Another theory focused on the red Toyota Celica driven by Richard Call and Cassandra Haley. When their car was found, it was unlocked. Nothing stolen, no signs of a struggle, but the driver's seat was pushed back, further than Richard would have needed. Some believe someone else sat there after he disappeared, that they drove the car to the overlook, that they parked it, locked it, and walked away, calm, clean, invisible. But perhaps the strangest theory is that the killer wanted them to be found. Think about it. Kathy and Rebecca were stuffed in the trunk, but the fire was never lit. David and Robin's bodies were dumped just far enough to be missed, then washed back by the tide. Daniel and Anna Maria were covered in a blanket, but left just a few hundred yards from their car. If this was about secrecy, why not hide them better? If it was rage, why so meticulous? And if it was just random violence, why only couples? Unless the killer wanted to be known. Not caught, known. Wanted people to see the pattern, to whisper, to fear the Parkway at night. Some investigators said the killer might have kept souvenirs, driver's licenses, jewelry, notes, but nothing's ever surfaced. And the killer never bragged. No letters, no taunts, no coded messages, just silence. By 2010, advancements in DNA gave some hope. A partial male DNA profile was recovered from the scene of one of the killings. But it wasn't enough to match to a suspect. It sat in a database waiting, still waiting. That same year, a group of independent researchers began re-examining the case. They combed through public files, used geographic profiling, and mapped every known movement of the victims. What they found chilled them. Each victim had been intercepted, not chased, not followed home, intercepted. Their cars were found parked neatly, not crashed, not dragged, parked. It suggested control, that whoever did this had a way of approaching without alarming them. A way to gain trust. A badge? A light bar? Or just the right words? The families believed the killer was someone in authority, or someone pretending to be, the kind of person you'd roll down your window for at night, the kind of person you wouldn't run from, until it was too late. And if that's true, then the killer could have been anyone. A cop, a ranger, a security guard, a military man, someone used to being obeyed, someone used to silence. Today, the Colonial Parkway looks the same. Winding, serene, peaceful. Tourists drive it. Couples picnic by the water. Kids ride bikes where bodies were once dumped. Most don't know. Most never heard the names. Kathy and Becky, David and Robin, Richard and Cassandra, Daniel and Anna Maria. They became shadows, blurred faces on yellowing posters, statistics in a fading folder. But the families remember. And the killer? He remembers too. Because you don't kill like that and forget. You don't tie someone's hands, slash their throat, soak their car in gasoline, and move on like it was just another Friday night. Not unless something inside you is broken. Or worse, empty. In part 3, we'll look at the suspects, the files, the missteps that cost 8 people their lives, and the newest theories about who might have done it. Because even ghosts leave footprints, and some of them still walk the parkway. They say killers always leave something behind. A trace, a print, a clue. But sometimes what they leave behind is worse than evidence. It's a void, a silence that stretches across decades, a shadow cast on families who never get to grieve properly, never get to heal, just sit in limbo year after year, asking the same question. Why? The Colonial Parkway murders left 8 victims in their wake, and not a single conviction. Kathy Thomas, Rebecca Dowski, David Knobling, Robin Edwards, Cassandra Haley, Richard Call, Anna Maria Phelps, Daniel Lauer, for couples, for crime scenes, for years, and no arrests. But it wasn't for lack of suspects. In the 1990s, the FBI quietly investigated several men. One was a former cop, known to use excessive force, lived in the region, had a reputation for pulling over young people late at night. But there was no hard evidence. No DNA.
No confession.
No smoking gun. Another was a security guard, military background, fired for harassment, allegedly obsessed with control. Again, no proof. No physical connection to the victims. Then there was the theory of multiple killers. 2 people working together. Maybe even a man and a woman. It would explain how the couples were controlled so easily. How both parties in the car were subdued without a struggle. But no duo ever fit the profile. And the case drifted. In 2009, the case files were digitized. Over 1,000 pages. Some made public. Others redacted. Families got access to new information. And what they found was painful. Evidence had been misplaced. A tape containing an early confession from a witness was lost. Leads that should have been followed weren't. Communications between departments were inconsistent at best, non-existent at worst. It wasn't just a matter of the killer hiding. It was the system failing. In one of the cases, police received an anonymous letter. It claimed to know details about one of the murders that weren't made public. It talked about location, position of the bodies, how the car was found. But instead of chasing it down, it was filed and left in a drawer. Years passed. The writer never contacted them again. Was it the killer? Or just someone playing a cruel game? We'll never know. In another case, a man confessed to the killings while being held on unrelated charges. But his timeline didn't line up. He wasn't in Virginia when some of the murders occurred. The confession was discarded. False leads, lost files, decades of dead ends. Meanwhile, the families aged. Some passed away never knowing who took their children. Others kept pushing, refusing to let the trail go cold. Bill Thomas, Kathy's brother, became one of the most vocal advocates. He launched a website, appeared on news programs, filed FOIA requests, spoke to criminologists. He kept the story alive because he believed that someone out there still knew something, that the killer or someone who had helped had simply gotten away with it. And maybe they had. There's one piece of physical evidence that still gives hope. The DNA sample. It came from one of the crime scenes. Partial male profile. Not enough to make an arrest, but enough to rule people out. It didn't match any of the original suspects. It didn't match anyone in CODIS, the National DNA Database. It was just there, floating, waiting. In 2021, Virginia authorities began using new genealogical DNA tracking, the same method that caught the Golden State Killer. The process is slow. It involves building family trees from partial DNA, tracking distant relatives, narrowing the possibilities down generation by generation. It takes months, sometimes years, but it works. And maybe it will work here. Maybe the killer made one mistake, left one cell, one drop of sweat, one trace of skin. Maybe right now someone is sitting in a house in Virginia, watching the news, hearing about DNA advances, wondering if they're next, if the knock will come, but maybe not. Maybe he's already dead, buried with the secret, or maybe he left the state, started over, became someone new, a father, a grandfather, a smiling face at the grocery store, because monsters don't wear masks. They wear uniforms. They wear charm. They wear silence. That's the real horror, that the person who did this might have been hiding in plain sight the entire time, tending church, coaching little league, waving to neighbors, and every once in a while, driving down the Colonial Parkway, just to remember. The truth is, the case has never really been cold. Not completely. There have always been embers, hints, names whispered behind closed doors, tips that were never made public. But none of them brought closure. And now, nearly 40 years later, the Parkway remains a scar on Virginia's history. People still drive it. They still admire the view. They still pull into the scenic overlooks and watch the water ripple under the trees. But those who remember, they know. They know what was left behind in those woods. They know what the river swallowed. They know that someone out there was never caught, and that they might still be out there, listening, waiting. The Colonial Parkway looks peaceful, but peace can be a mask. And some roads were never meant to be safe. Some roads are meant to be warnings. Don't stop. Don't pull over. Don't trust the dark. Because out here, no one came home.